Notre Dame had one of the best defenses in the country last season, but if they're able to improve next season, it will have a lot to do with how these key position battles shake out. That's next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. Today is Friday, March 15th, so happy Friday. And thank you for getting your day started right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018, and now I'm a producer covering college football for Fox Sports. And you can watch this show on YouTube, or you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching along on YouTube, please take a second, like the video below, and subscribe to the channel. Or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and subscribe if you have not already. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We are going to continue to look at what I believe are the most intriguing position battles on the roster today. Today's focus is going to be on the defense. I went over the key position battles on offense in yesterday's show, so go check that out once you're done with this one if you have not tuned into that one already. And then at the end, you knew it was going to happen, but it looks like the college football playoff is going to expand to 14 teams. They're going to finalize the deal. Honestly, by the time you're listening to this show, it might already be finalized. And even though the format is not solidified just yet, there's a lot of very important details in there that are especially important to Notre Dame as well. So I'll get to that in segment 3, but let's start here with the most important position battles on the defense. And let's start with cornerback / nickel. I kind of lumped them together because they kind of go hand in hand. And to me, this is the most compelling position battle on the entire roster. Okay, it's a very legitimate competition. The players involved are very talented, and they probably all have a right to the starting job. And I think whoever wins, specifically at the field corner, that's going to shape Notre Dame's entire secondary, and that could be a big reason why Notre Dame could end up having one of the best defensive backfields in all of college football. So when we look at the quarterbacks, we know one thing is true. We know that Benjamin Morrison is going to be starting at the boundary. He is one of, if not the best cornerbacks in all of college football. So it's great that Notre Dame has a player like that where they can put him on the boundary, they can play man-to-man, and whatever happens everywhere else on the field, like they can figure that out. They have an absolute certainty at one of those spots. On the field side, the nickel and the field corner spots are up for grabs right now. Jaden Mickey and Christian Gray are battling it out to be the field corner. Whatever happens there is probably going to have a domino effect that could impact the nickel as well, because let's say Christian Gray wins the field corner job. Okay, so he's going to be starting there. Jaden Mickey cannot play nickel. He's just not big enough to play that position. However, if Jaden Mickey were to win the field corner spot, then all of a sudden maybe Christian Gray could move to play the nickel spot, because Gray, his body type is more compatible to play the nickel. If you are going to be playing the nickel, you're going to be lined up in the box a lot, and you're going to have to be important stopping the run. And Jaden Mickey is like 175 pounds, so he can't really play that position as well. But Gray can, which is why it's so interesting. And when it comes to the battle for the field corner spot, Mickey is more experienced, but as I've said many times before on this podcast, I believe that Christian Gray has the higher ceiling, and maybe I have not given Jaden Mickey the props he deserves. I know that he was one of the best players in the first spring practice for Notre Dame. I think he was beating Chris Mitchell in the one-on-ones consistently. Tim O'Malley from Irish Illustrated talked about that on the show on Wednesday. And then Chris Mitchell did get the better of Jaden Mickey on one deep ball. And I have to imagine, given how much trash that Jaden Mickey talks, whenever a wide receiver is able to get the better of Jaden Mickey, it probably feels that much better compared to the rest of the defensive backs. But hey, that's part of Mickey's game. I know Marcus Freeman loves him, Mike Mickens loves him, and that's kind of what makes him such a good player. So I don't really fault him. I'm just saying that, like, when you're a receiver and you get to beat the defensive back that won't stop talking, that feels better than beating all the other guys. But if Mickey were to start a field, and I think that leaves at least the option for Gray to move over to nickel. He's going to have some competition because right now it looks like the nickel spot is Jordan Clark's to lose. Jordan Clark transferred over from Arizona State to be the starting nickel. He was the first transfer, I believe, to come over to Notre Dame. It was either him or Chris Mitchell. They did it in like back-to-back days. So I think Clark was the first to announce. Like I said, he came from Arizona State. His dad, Ryan Clark, he's on ESPN. He was a great safety for the Steelers and LSU. So he comes from great football pedigree. But last season, if you look at the stats and you look at the film, Clark struggled. Now, I know we've heard a lot about a potential injury that Clark might have been dealing with throughout the year, but eventually he's going to have to be ready to go, and he's going to have to prove in spring practice that he should be out there for a lot of snaps, because if you look at what Notre Dame ran out last year, Thomas Harper, who was the starting nickel, he played 438 snaps. That was 10th on the defense, despite the fact that he missed the Louisville game with the concussion, and he opted out of the bowl games. And so despite missing those 2 games, he was still 10th in snaps, and that just shows you 2 things. 1, how often Notre Dame was in the nickel defense, which allowed Harper to be on the field, and 2, just how valuable he was and why they wanted him on the field so often. So I don't have the same expectations for Clark, but even if he is not the starter, he's going to be rotating in, but who is he going to rotate in with? Now that is where Clarence Lewis, CPA, joins the fray. Marcus Freeman mentioned Clarence Lewis as someone who is going to be rotating in. He's moved back to playing with the corners. I believe he experimented at safety a little bit. And I like Clarence Lewis a lot. He's been around a long time. He's had some highs and lows throughout his career, but he's definitely a very experienced guy and someone you want to have on your team, especially as a backup role player. But if you want to play nickel, you have to be a good tackler, and Clarence Lewis just isn't. He had 5 missed tackles last season and honestly could have had a few more. That's according to Pro Football Focus. So I don't love the idea of Clarence Lewis playing nickel, and maybe Marcus Freeman is just saying that now to keep him involved, keep him invested in the team. And he really hasn't mentioned anything about the possibility of Gray moving inside to nickel, but I think it's all on the table right now, and how this competition shakes out over the course of spring practice is going to be really interesting, and I honestly think it's going to bleed over into fall camp. Like, I think Mickey and Gray are going to be going at it for a long, long time, and then whoever wins that, it's going to affect the nickel. It's going to really impact the entire defensive backfield, which leads me to the next position battle that I'm looking at, and that's at safety. And safety is similar to cornerback in that one spot is locked down, and not only is it locked down, it's locked down by one of the top defensive players in all of college football. Like, we know Xavier Watts is going to be one of the starting safeties. The other is kind of up for grabs. I think we all expect Rod Hurd, the transfer from Northwestern, to win that job once he's able to practice with the team. Right now, he is unable to participate in the practices because he's still enrolled at Northwestern to get his master's degree. As I understand it, he's in South Bend, and I think he might even have to commute a little bit back and forth to Evanston, but he's finishing up his master's degree, and then starting in the summer, he's going to be a full participant with Notre Dame during summer workouts and all of that. But due to NCAA rules, he cannot practice right now. What that does is it leaves the door open for Adon Schuler, Luke Talich, Ben Minnick to get reps there to start opposite Xavier Watts. Now, Hurd is much more experienced than all of those guys. He's a 2-year starter for Northwestern, and he played even before that as a rotational guy before. Last season, he registered 85 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 1 interception, and 4 passes deflected. So he brings a ton of experience. He's actually played more than DJ Brown had going into last season. So it's pretty likely that he's going to be getting a lot of reps at safety. But we also know that Notre Dame likes to rotate a third safety a lot. If you look at what Notre Dame did last season, Ramon Henderson played over 300 snaps coming in for DJ Brown. And I know the Notre Dame coaching staff thought very highly of DJ Brown, even if he wasn't the playmaker that Xavier Watts is. So the fact that they were rotating them as much as they did was pretty telling. And I expect Notre Dame to rotate a lot this year as well. So when you look at the guys behind Hurd, or at least we expect to be behind Hurd, with Schuler, Talich, and Minich, I don't really know who's going to get that spot. Right now, it looks like Schuler is the odds-on favorite. He ran out with the ones in the first practice. He didn't really see a ton of action last season. He got a little bit more time in the Sun Bowl. Oregon State kind of picked on him a little bit, but I'm not really going to hold that against him. That was like his first ever game action. So I think that now that it's his second spring with the team, although last year he wasn't able to participate because he was recovering from an injury, I think that this is a big opportunity for him, especially being out there with the first unit. I think that when he makes plays with them, it's going to feel a little bit more significant than if he's doing it against the backup. So I think he's got a really good shot to be that third safety. Luke Talge is a guy, he was a former walk-on, now he's on scholarship. I know that the staff is high on him, and a big part of that is because of his length. He's 6'4", has super long arms. I don't know if he's physically ready to get in there and be in the box as much as a guy like Schuler or Hurd for that record, because I think Xavier Watts is going to be playing deeper most of the time. Last year you saw DJ Brown come up a lot to stop the run, and he wasn't particularly good at that. I think that is Hurd's specialty. So that bodes really well for the Notre Dame defense. But if Notre Dame wants to have one of the best secondaries in college football, they're going to need Hurd to deliver, and they're going to need him to be better than DJ Brown. Hopefully, Hurd is able to make an interception late in the game on, let's say, the final drive, a very important game, and the ball hits him right in the hands. Hopefully, Hurd is able to do that, even if he's not quite as good in coverage as he is at stopping the run. So they need that to happen. They also need whoever wins the battle between Mickey and Gray to really elevate their game. And they don't even have to be as good as Cam Hart was last season, because he was really, really good. And I think that Benjamin Morrison is going to be better this year than he was last year. Same with Xavier Watts, even if he doesn't rack up as many interceptions. These competitions, how they shake out is going to go a long way in determining just how good this Notre Dame defense can be, because they were great last season. They returned 6 starters, and there's a really great opportunity for this defensive backfield to be maybe the best in my lifetime. Now, I was born in 1996, so if you want to come at me about the early 90s, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just saying that right now, the prospects for this group are really, really encouraging, but they need some of these guys to step up. And whatever happens in these position battles is going to go a long way in determining just how good this secondary can be, as well as the defense as a whole. All right, coming up next, we know Jack Kaiser is going to start at linebacker, but who's going to play alongside him? Today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% match on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Today's episode is also brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV also offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV. And it provides access to millions of movies and television episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big professional leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channel lets you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to stay up to date on all the latest in the world of sports. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. All right, we continue with my top position battles on the defense at linebacker. And this is really interesting, especially for the first time in years, right? Because J.D. Bertrand and Maris Liufau have dominated those reps at starting linebacker for a long time now. So Jack Kaiser is returning for his 6th year, and we know he's going to start. I project it will be at the weak side linebacker spot, the will, which is where Maris Liufau has played the last couple of years. And right now, it looks like Drake Bowen, who's going to be a sophomore next season, is going to be the starter at Mike. Now, Mike is a very important position because you're playing right in the middle of the field and you're responsible for aligning a lot of other players on the defense. That is what made Well, one of the reasons why J.D. Bertrand was so valuable is he was so smart and he just like grinded out so much film and tape that he knew where everyone was supposed to be at all times. So I think that one of the great assets of Bertrand was he prevented a lot of big plays from happening by getting guys in the right spot, even if he wasn't the one in there making the play. So to ask someone like Drake Bowen, who has only played 74 snaps in his college career so far, to come in and be as good as J.D. Bertrand is unrealistic. Now, you can make the case that maybe Drake Bowen is a better athlete and that eventually he will be a better all-around player. I don't think that's possible for him next season. Plus, he's playing baseball right now on top of having spring practice, so it's not really possible for him to completely invest all into football right now during spring practice. So behind Drake Bowen, you've got Kingston Viliamu-Asif, who is very interesting for a ton of different reasons. He's a very highly touted early enrollee, and Marcus Freeman has already said KVA has a chance to contribute right away. He played for one of the top high school programs in the entire country, St. John Bosco, out here in LA, and he was the best player on that team. That's a program that had DJ Uyunglele and a bunch of other really good college football players come through there in recent years. I know that DJU is like the most prominent. There's probably a bunch of other ones who I'm forgetting, but still, you get my point. There's a bunch of really good high school football out here in California, and he was one of, if not the best player in the state, and he's physically ready to contribute right away. But then again, even though I think the future is extremely bright for Kingston, asking a true freshman to start at Mike linebacker and call out the defense every snap is a lot to ask, even for a player who is as talented and as smart as KVA. So that's a really interesting battle right there at Mike. And then you have Rover. Like, what's going to happen there? Rover is interesting because that's the position that gets subbed out whenever the nickel comes in. As I explained in segment 1, that happens a lot. Notre Dame likes to run nickel. Max Bola, the linebackers coach, even said when he was introduced as the new linebackers coach, it's a nickel world. So there's a lot of times when the Rover position isn't even on the field. So what does that mean for Jalen Sneed? We know that Sneed is incredibly athletic. We know that he's very good at getting after the passer. We also know that this is a very, very important year for him. He came in as a 5-star prospect and a really, really bright future, but he hasn't really been able to put it all together. I think that no matter what happens with the Rover spot, we know that Jalen Sneed is going to be in on third down, obvious passing situations because he is just so quick and so violent off the line of scrimmage that he can get into the backfield. Doesn't matter where he is or what position he's playing. He can make some plays in that situation. But Notre Dame needs a really good all-around Rover. So if he takes a big step this spring, that could be really interesting because maybe he's so good that he just needs to be on the field at all times. If he's that much better than, let's say, Drake Bowen, then there's a scenario where Notre Dame could maybe move Jack Kaiser over to Mike and then bring in Jalen Sneed at will. That's interesting because I at least trust Jack Kaiser to be able to call out the defense. He's a 6-year guy. He's been in the program for a long time. He knows Al Golden's defense really well. But the issue there is that Jack Kaiser actually had to play the mic last season when he filled in one game for J.D. Bertrand, and then it did not really go that well. Now, the difference is when he played the position that wasn't his natural spot, if Notre Dame goes through spring practice and they're like, okay, wait a second, we need to move Jack Kaiser inside. He at least has the summer and even the spring to some extent to really bulk up, put on weight, and have the body type to be a Mike linebacker because it's a little bit different when you're playing Will. You're going to be in coverage a little bit more. When you're Mike, you're right there in the middle of the defense, and you've got to be physically ready to go to play that position. So Notre Dame at least has some time there. They can experiment there. They can maybe move Kaiser over there to Mike. And then you've got Jaden Osbury, who's like the dark horse in all of this because he's going to be a redshirt freshman. And he, according to multiple sources, and Tim O'Malley, who, like I said, was on Wednesday's show, Osbury was the most impressive of any linebacker on the field that day. He even played the mic a little bit and was getting KVA aligned. So I think that's really interesting because if he's that versatile and he can play the mic and Notre Dame, it's not that they don't trust Drake Bowen, but if Osbury is just so good that they want to get him on the field and they could fit him in there at Mike alongside Jack Kaiser, that could be really interesting as well. I think that Osbury, one thing you hear about him a lot is how high his IQ is or his football IQ is. So I think that could potentially change the entire rotation if Osbury just continues to develop and continues to have these really great practices. Then he's going to have to be on the field, and then it's on Max Bola and Al Golden to figure out who's going to be where and what makes sense for the defense as a whole. So there's a lot of different options to choose from here. And that's why I think the linebacker position is just so interesting because, like I said, you've got one lock in Kaiser. Like, he's going to be on the field a ton this season. But then behind him, it's a lot of young guys, and it's a lot of inexperienced guys who are loaded with potential, but they just haven't really done that much in their college career. So whenever they play against Texas A&M, a lot of it is going to be their first time. Not necessarily so much for Snead because he's at least been on the field, but this is going to be his first time where he's going to be asked to be an all-around linebacker. And I think it's just going to be really exciting to watch. It's really interesting to see how it's all going to shake out. The good thing for Notre Dame is that they have Al Golden, who's one of the best defensive minds in all of college football, and they have Max Bola leading the charge there at the position. He was last year as a GA. Now it's official. He's the official linebackers coach for Notre Dame. And this is going to be a very interesting test for those guys as well because, I don't want to say their job was easy, but it's easier when you have guys like Bertrand and Maris Liufau who are as experienced as they were. It's a lot easier as the defensive coordinator to call out different things and try to experiment and put guys in different spots because you trust them to always get the guys around them in the right spot at the right time. So linebacker is going to be very, very interesting this season. Okay, the last position battle that I want to look at here, and it's not as compelling as the other positions, I'll give you that. It's defensive end. We know who's going to start, at least at the beginning of the year. R.J. Oben, the Duke transfer, is going to start at the strong side end, and then you've got Jordan Botelho, who's going to start at Viper. I feel great about that. Oben is a 6-year guy. He's really good at Duke. He had 5 sacks last season, has 13.5 in his career, plus 18.5 total TFLs. That's actually more productive than JJB was prior to arriving at Notre Dame. Now, we all know how good of a player he ended up being, but still, Oben comes in with a ton of experience and a ton of really quality film to back that up. Botelho, in his first season as a starter last season, I think a lot of people had really high hopes for him. I was one of those people, and he did okay. Like, he wasn't bad. He just didn't make the leap that people were hoping that he would. He wasn't that dominant wrecking force there on the edge that people thought he could be and that he had shown flashes of being at multiple times throughout his career. I think if you just convinced Jordan Botelho that every game is a bowl game, he might be one of the best players in college football. I think in the Gator Bowl a couple years ago, he had 2 sacks. Then he was unbelievable last season in the Sun Bowl. So I don't know. Maybe something that Al Washington is going to have to consider, brainwashing Jordan Botelho and be like, this is a bowl game. But I feel great about the starting job, but I think that something potentially interesting could happen behind Botelho, and that's Boubacar Traore's development. He is entering his second season, and even though he's still very raw as a football player, he's incredibly explosive. And we saw a glimpse of that against USC last year when he absolutely dominated the right tackle on USC, made one move, blew right by him, and then sacked Caleb Williams in the backfield. Then it looked like it was going to be the last play of the first half, but then he was celebrating it like midfield, and then we all know what happened. They threw the flag, they didn't throw the flag. Marcus Freeman had to call a timeout to avoid the flag, and then USC ended up kicking a field goal. It felt like that could have been catastrophic and ended up not being all that important, but still, that one play alone showed you just how good of a player that Traore could be. We've also heard that there were times last season of fall camp when Traore was unblockable, and he was really getting after the quarterback, and he was causing a lot of problems for Blake Fisher and whoever they lined up in front of him. This could be the year we start to see that come to fruition a little bit, and if he is that explosive, and maybe even if he's just a package player on third downs, if he's a guy that's going to be that needs to be on the field, then that takes reps away from Jordan Botelho. And then Josh Burnham is another guy the staff is really high on and someone that we all need to keep an eye out for in this defensive end rotation as well. I think he's going to be playing behind R.J. Oben as the strong side end, but he continues to get better and better, and he could force his way onto the field. As good as Oben is at getting after the passer, he hasn't really shown to be that good at stopping the run, at least not yet in his career. And that was the same sort of criticism of Javonte Jean-Baptiste before he arrived at Notre Dame. It's like, okay, we know you can get after the passer. Can you stop the run? Well, he absolutely proved that he was capable of doing that in his one season at Notre Dame. Is R.J. Oben going to be able to do the same thing? I don't know. If he's not, that opens the door for Josh Burnham to come in, especially in early down situations. If he's able to do that, maybe he comes in, makes some plays there, and then he's in on third down as well. It's all very interesting. So even though I don't think that like Burnham or Traore are going to be able to jump Oben or Botelho at the start of the year, maybe as the season goes along, they could start taking some reps away. And then you've got a wild card here, and that's Junior Tuihalamaka. To be honest with you, I was always surprised when the staff decided to move him from Mike Linebacker to Viper because he was pretty highly touted coming out of high school. I know that USC thought they had him, and then Marcus Freeman kind of swooped in and got him to commit to Notre Dame, and it was a really big commitment. The future was really bright for him, and then they immediately moved him to Viper, and I was like, that's kind of interesting. But then it seemed like the rationale from the coaches was that they didn't think he was fast enough to cover guys as a linebacker, but now I'm like, is he big enough to play on the defensive line every single snap? And it looks like they're still trying to figure things out with him. And I think that this spring practice is very important for him because if he's not able to really show anything, if he's not able to take that next step, he might be in no man's land on the depth chart. And I don't really know what his future is at Notre Dame. If Traore jumps him and then Josh Burnham is getting on the field a little bit more than him, I don't really know what's going to happen. Or he might just surprise us all and then just be a force on the edge. And then maybe he's getting some reps in there as well. It's all going to be something worth following throughout spring practice and into fall camp. We know the defensive line is going to be the strength of the team, given what they have on the interior in Cross and Mills. And I feel like this group could end up being, one of the best defensive lines in the country. But if they want to make a run in the playoff, they need one or both of their edge guys to step up and be a game wrecker in Oben and Botello. And then they need quality reserves to come in with fresh legs and dominate as well. It's going to be really, really interesting to follow. All right, that's it for the position battles. Now we've got to talk more about the new 14-team playoff format and everything that goes on there with the revenue share and all of that. We knew it was coming, and you know how much I don't like it, but I think Notre Dame is actually going to come out of this all right. I'll explain why right after this. This week's March Madness Bracket Highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The Tennessee Volunteers can only be described as a Pathfinder. They've been thrilling to watch and have really created a lane for themselves after claiming the top spot in the SEC. Player of the Year candidate Dalton Knecht has carried the balls all season long and made them a team to watch in March. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Before we move on to the expanded college football playoff, be sure to mark your calendar for the Locked On College Basketball Bracket Breakdown Show on Monday, March 18th at 7 a.m. Eastern. Experts Andy Patton and Isaac Shade will break down their brackets and discuss everything that you need to know to fill out a winning bracket and prepare for this year's NCAA tournament. Find the Locked On Bracket Breakdown on Monday, March 18th on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. All right, I want to wrap up today's show with some thoughts on the new deal that looks like it's going to be finalized today. If you're listening to this, it might already be a done deal. So on Thursday, Pete Thamel and Heather Dinich of ESPN reported that each conference in Notre Dame are expected to finalize the new college football playoff agreement starting in 2026. And as I've said before, everything was already agreed for 2024 and 2025. The television deal, the 12-team playoff, the revenue share, all of that was set in stone. But starting in 2026, it was basically like a clean slate. So the college football playoff needed to find a new TV partner, although it looks like it's going to be the same TV partner in ESPN. They needed to, I thought they would just do the 12-team format, but it looks like they wanted to tinker with that as well. So after all of that, it looks like that they've finally come to an agreement, and it's going to set the stage for a 14-team playoff to start in 2026. Even though this specific deal that's going to be agreed upon today doesn't specifically say 14 teams, it says it will be at least 12 teams, but at this point, everyone expects it to be 14, and I think they're going to finalize that at a later date, according to Thamel and Dinich's report. And obviously, that's going to have very important implications for Notre Dame as well. So even though the format and the automatic qualifiers, all of that still needs to be figured out, there are some things in this deal that are very important to Notre Dame. A lot of that has to do with the revenue. So bear with me here. The Big Ten and the SEC will probably make about $21 million per school every year with this deal, which is a giant increase from what they currently make, which is just a little bit north of $5.5 million for all the Power 5 leagues. Notre Dame, meanwhile, is expected to get a little more than $12 million per year. So even though it's really good, it's around $9 million less annually than what the Big Ten and the SEC make. What that tells you is the cost of being independent is even greater than it was before. Like, we already knew Notre Dame was taking a pay cut during the regular season. Their deal with NBC is not as much as they would make in the Big Ten or the SEC by dozens of millions. It's the biggest misconception in the college football world when anyone ever says, oh, Notre Dame just wants to be independent because they want to keep the money or greed or any of that. It's just not true. It's actually the opposite of that, right? But you're smart. You know that. We've talked about that before. But now Notre Dame's postseason money is less too. So the cost is going up for Notre Dame to remain independent. The ACC and Big 12, they're actually going to make around the same amount of money, even though the conferences are pretty pissed off about that. I think the Big 10 and the SEC just have way more leverage in these discussions, considering just how loaded those conferences have already been and how even more loaded they're going to be in the future after this most recent wave of conference realignment, which put Oklahoma and Texas in the SEC, and then like Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, all in the Big 10. So they're the top dogs. They're kind of calling the shots here, and the ACC and Big 12 are falling in line. But even though they're mad, there's an option for them to renegotiate starting in 2028. And who even knows what the college football world is going to look like in 2028? That's why I kind of think that having these discussions now is pretty pointless, because it does seem like we're on the precipice of another wave, a conference realignment, but it doesn't matter right now. All we know is that it looks like this deal is going to be agreed upon today. And beyond all the revenue jargon, that's probably not that interesting to everyone, the good thing is it appears that Notre Dame is going to have a clear path to the playoff, even if it's a 14-team format. As I understand it, the proposed format that has the most legs to it right now allows Notre Dame to get an automatic bid so long as they finish in the top 14 of the CFP rankings. If they do that, they're in. That should be pretty feasible and will likely be enough for them to remain independent. Again, this is a change from when it was first brought up. It felt like Notre Dame's status and all of it was uncertain. I thought that maybe this could be the thing that pushes Notre Dame to join a conference. And even if the exact format might not be the reason, I do think that the fact that they're making $9 million less every year because of this new revenue share, I think that's going to be important. And I think that eventually Notre Dame is going to figure out, okay, just how worth it is being independent, considering the gap in revenue between the Big Ten and the SEC schools and what Notre Dame is making as an independent. Again, that's probably something that's going to be figured out at a much later date. I don't think we're close to that yet, but again, it's something to monitor. And I feel like as much as I hate this 14-team playoff, because I know it's going to come with automatic qualifiers, and I just think it's diluting the regular season product, I at least feel a little bit better about Notre Dame's place in it all. Like I said, the exact format has not been finalized. That's going to happen in the future. And of course, when it does, we're going to be talking about it right here on the show. So you're going to want to tune in for that. You're going to want to tune in every single day, right? That's what we're doing over here on the show. But that is going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I hope you have a great St. Patrick's Day weekend filled with Guinness, green beer, fun with friends and family. Seriously, enjoy. It's my favorite holiday of the year, and I hope you get to celebrate it as well. I'll be back with you next week. In the meantime, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever listening to the podcast, and give us a follow on social media. Have a great weekend, everybody.